Welcome back. Time for the next presentation. And after the presentation, I will ask some questions, and the audience is also welcome with questions. And we welcome Rami Levin, CEO of Saniona, and you will present the company. The scene is yours.
Good morning, everyone here in Boston. I'm delighted to share with you our story of Saniona, the products that we are developing, who we are, and where we want to move forward with. This presentation will contain some forward-looking statements. I'm not going to go and read through this. So who is Saniona? We are a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company. We are focused on rare diseases, and more specifically, diseases with unmet medical need. Our most advanced treatment in clinical development is a product called Glycemic, which we are developing for 2 rare disease indications. The first one is called hypothalamic obesity, and the second one is called Prader-Willi syndrome. In both cases, we have been interacting with the FDA, and in both cases, we are planning to initiate a phase 2b study in the first half of 2021. One of the unique things about Saniona is not only that we have a product in mid to late stage clinical development for 2 rare disorders, we also have a unique drug discovery platform, which is based in Copenhagen. And what that drug discovery platform will do is it will fuel our future portfolio of products and allow us to build and grow on the innovation that comes out from our discovery platform. 2 of the leading assets in preclinical development are, the first one is SAN711. We are developing SAN711 for rare neuropathic disorders. SAN711 is actually ready to move into clinical development, into phase 1 clinical development, and that will take place in the first half of next year as well. So as you can see, the first half of 2021 will be quite busy for us with potentially 2 phase 2b trials and a phase 1 trial. SAN903, which is about a year behind in development than SAN711, we are exploring SAN903 for rare inflammatory disorders. SAN903 will be ready to move into phase 1 clinical development, probably in the first half of 2022. One of the unique things of having a drug discovery platform is the ability to discover a variety of different molecules. As per our strategy, if those molecules have a potential in rare diseases, we have the full intent as a company to develop those ourselves and ultimately commercialize those ourselves, and that will be our main focus moving forward. There will, however, also be molecules that may have a better use in larger indications. Being a rare disease company, it is likely that in those instances, we would opt to partner or out-license those molecules to larger pharmaceutical companies for them to develop and ultimately commercialize those products. Under those agreements, our preference would be to get milestone payments throughout the development and royalties once the product is approved and launched on the market. And that business model we actually have already in practice. We have 3 out-licensing agreements. The first one is for tesofensine for obesity, which we out-licensed to a company called Medix. Medix have obesity clinics in Mexico and Argentina. Under that agreement, once the product is approved, which is anticipated to take place either by the end of the year or first quarter next year, we will be getting royalties on sales. Other agreements that we already now have in place is an agreement with Cadence Therapeutics, who are based here in the Boston area. We out-licensed a product to them called CAD 1883, which they are investigating for 2 indications, essential tremor and ataxia. Under that agreement, we have shares in the company, and we will be getting royalties once the product is approved on the market for either of those 2 indications. And last but not least, we have an agreement with Boehringer Ingelheim for a novel target that we haven't communicated for their schizophrenia program. Under that agreement, we will be getting both milestone payments throughout the clinical development as well as royalties once the product is approved. And that's kind of a high level of the company. In recent news of the company, you may have heard of a successful raise of $65 million in a directed issue of shares that took place back in August. That was a transformational deal for the company. It allowed us for the first time ever really to actually refocus our efforts to actually build and grow the company. And more specifically, it really allows us to advance Tesomet to the next phase of clinical development, both in hypothalamic obesity and Prader-Willi syndrome. It allows us to advance SAN 711 and 903 both into phase 1 clinical development. And it allows us to build the organization and hire the people predominantly here in the Boston area to be able to do everything that we need to do moving forward. So we're very excited with the raise, but equally we are excited is with the list of institutional investors. These are the top experts in biotech in the world, led by RA Capital Management, but also were Pontifax, New Leaf Ventures, and others that were part of this deal and the foundation of our new shareholder base. Not only were they helpful in solidifying our recent deal, but really will be helpful incrementally as we advance with our goals moving forward. And shortly after the raise, we announced as a company the expansion of our executive team. Most of them are here in the Boston area. This is the Saniona executive team. Everyone apart from our CSO, who's still based in Copenhagen and will remain there with the discovery platform, with the scientists, all our labs, all that will remain in Copenhagen. But all the other functions, as we are building them out and building out a biotech company, all of them are based here in the Boston area and are building their teams here as well. So let's kind of dive into our lead asset. Our lead asset is Tesomet. What is Tesomet? And talk a bit about the mechanism of action before we dive into some of the clinical data. So Tesomet is a true triple monoamine reuptake inhibitor combined with a beta blocker. So it's a combo therapy called Tesomet. And what Tesomet does, it targets very specifically the reward center and the appetite center. And those are critical for diseases such as hypothalamic obesity and such as Prader-Willi syndrome, because what that does is it basically increases the levels of 3 monoamines: dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. And those 3 monoamines are critical in hyperphagia, in food craving, because what they do is they reduce the craving for food by increasing dopamine. Increasing serotonin reduces the appetite. And increasing noradrenaline increases the metabolic fat burn, which is critical for both of those diseases. So this is a very important mechanism of action that really targets the most critical aspects of these 2 disorders. So let's talk a bit about hypothalamic obesity more specifically. So what is hypothalamic obesity? It's an acquired disease. It's not a genetic disease. It typically happens as a result of a injury to the hypothalamus in the brain. That in 50% of the cases, it's basically a removal or an injury following a removal of a brain tumor, a rare brain tumor in the brain, which then causes a very rapid onset of insatiable weight gain and which results in obesity. There are about 1 in 50 to 1 in 100,000 patients is the prevalence. In the US, there are about 3,400 to 6,800 patients. In Europe, slightly more patients, about 5,500 to 11,000 patients. Apart from a very quick onset of weight gain, these patients also have a variety of other disease characteristics, from memory impairment to attention deficit to impulse control, and some of them also have depression, which in some occasions also results in suicide. So what have we done in hypothalamic obesity? We conducted a single site study with 21 patients that were randomized 2-to-1 in favor of Tesomet. The randomized blinded phase of the trial was a 6-month double-blind study that was completed back in April, and the positive results were announced, and I will share with you shortly. Those patients then continued into an open label extension for another 6 months, and those results are expected before the end of the year. So let's start with the blinded phase of the trial. The primary endpoint of this trial was safety and tolerability, as you would expect from a phase 2. Generally, the product Tesomet was safe and well tolerated. Some of the key secondary endpoints, there's a list of efficacy endpoints, but the most important one when it comes to hypothalamic obesity is actually body weight loss, and in this case, body weight loss from baseline to 6 months. So let's dive into some of the data. So this is the main efficacy endpoint, change in body weight from baseline. And what you can see here in gray is the placebo group, in blue is the Tesomet group, and you can see that the graph is separating already pretty much from the beginning and gains statistical significance from week 12 and then continues on all the way up to week 24, which is the 6-month period. At the end of the 6-month period, there was a 6.28% reduction in body weight change. This is not only statistically significant, but is actually also clinically meaningful. If you look at the FDA guidance for weight management, and this is the guidance that we follow and everyone follows when talking about weight management, we actually meet all the 3 criteria that the FDA put forward when it comes to weight management. The first criteria is that, all patients that have a significant decline of 5 or greater % in body weight loss, that has to be statistically significant. With Tesomet, the p-value was 0.0461, which made it statistically significant. The other 2 criteria are that at least 35% of the patients in the active group have to have a body weight loss of 5 or greater % in body weight loss. And in our case, with Tesomet, as you can see on the right, we showed a 62% of the patients had a 5% or greater body weight loss. And the last but not least was the proportion of patients with 5 or greater body weight loss had to be at least twice that of the placebo group. And as you can see on the right, the placebo group had 13% and Tesomet had 62%. So that was definitely more than double. So we basically met all 3 criteria for the FDA that the FDA put in place in their guidance to manage body weight loss. And you can see that on the graph, the left graph of which was the 5%. We took it one step further and actually asked ourselves, if you look at the patients who had a 10% or greater body weight loss, what was the difference there? And you see that 38% of the patients, which was 5 patients on the Tesomet group, had 10 or greater decrease in body weight loss versus 0 on the placebo group. Another parameter that the FDA looks at is the glycemic control. In our study, there were only 2 patients that had type 2 diabetes. Both patients were on the Tesomet group. And what you see in the graph on the right, on the left part of that graph where it says Tesomet, that's all patients that did not have, apart from those 2 type 2 diabetes. And you can see that there's no real difference between Tesomet and placebo, which is what you want to see when it comes to glycemic control. You don't want them to be hypoglycemic. But when you look at the 2 patients that were type 2 diabetic patients on the Tesomet and you gave them Tesomet, there was a remarkable 49% decline in glycemic control, which is what you want to see. You basically want to see a better control of these type 2 diabetic patients. So this is very outstanding results and very promising results, which then led us to meet with the FDA and have a conversation on how we can progress Tesomet in hypothalamic obesity. We are still in conversations with the FDA to align on the path forward. They did agree with the proposed path from a clinical development, which would be the next step would be a phase 2B followed by a phase 3. The next step from our perspective is to show the FDA how we will be able to control and ensure that Tesomet will be given just to the HO patients, which was one question that the FDA had, and we will get back to them and hopefully have an answer in Q1, which will then allow us to go into this trial, which is a phase 2B trial that we have proposed. The proposed phase 2B trial is a 9-month double-blind study with 2 doses of Tesomet versus placebo, followed by a 6-month open-label extension with the highest tolerated dose. The FDA agreed to this study, but before we can kick it off, we have to go back and show them how we will be able to ensure that only the hypothalamic obesity patients will be getting Tesomet once on the market. The next indication is Prader-Willi syndrome. Prader-Willi syndrome is a very different disorder to hypothalamic obesity. Prader-Willi syndrome is actually a genetic disease. And unlike Prader-Willi syndrome, where the main characteristic is body weight increase, the main and most debilitating characteristic of Prader-Willi syndrome is actually hyperphagia, which is a psychiatric disease, a psychiatric characteristic. It is this constant desire to eat. These patients nonstop look for food. They open the cabinets, they take out food from the trash, they pick up food from the floor. This is by far, according to families, by far the most difficult characteristic of the disease that impacts the families. These patients typically have a short life expectancy. They have a whole slew of other problems, from intellectual disabilities to physical deficiencies, behavior problems. And as I said, the most burdensome characteristic of this disease on the families is actually the hyperphagia. There are about 1 in 10 to 30,000 patients, or birth incidence is 1 in 10,000 to 30,000. There are about 8,000 to 11,000 patients in the US and about 13,000 to 8,000 patients in Europe. We conducted a phase 2 study in 2 parts. The first part of the study was in adults, which you can see on the far left. That was a 1-arm study of 0.5 milligram versus placebo for a period of 3 months. Once that study was concluded, we conducted a second trial in adolescents, younger adolescent kids, initially for 3 months in a double-blind fashion. We then had an open label extension where we allowed all the placebo patients to go on the active dose of 0.125. And then the last open label extension to the far right was another extra 3 months where we increased the dose from 0.125 to 0.25. So just to share some of the results, and we'll start with the adults. So this was given Tesomet at 0.5 milligrams. And generally you can see on the 2 main characteristics, hyperphagia on the right and body weight reduction on the left. On the body weight reduction, you can see a 5.4% reduction between the placebo group in gray and the Tesomet group in blue. Small group of patients, but definitely you can see a decline. On the right, you can see the hyperphagia. Again, the gray is a placebo, the blue is the Tesomet group, and apart from an initial placebo effect, ultimately the placebo group then started to increase, whereas the Tesomet group continued to decrease all the way at the end to 8.1 points, which were highly statistically significant. When looking at the adolescents group, which was the second study, here the dose was lowered 4-fold to 0.125. That dose was probably too low to begin with, and you can see that there's no difference between the placebo group and the low dose of 0.125, nor was there obviously any meaningful difference once all patients were moved to the 0.125 in the first open label extension. Apart from that, you can see an increase of body weight, which is expected. These are adolescents patients, so they grow in height and they grow in weight in any case. So you would expect that. The best to expect and anticipate typically in adolescents is at least to flatten the curve. And that's very different to adults who are already stable and you would like to reduce weight. But what we could also see is that when the patients moved into the second open label extension, both in the body weight on the left as well as the hyperphagia graph on the right, you can see when they moved into the second open label extension, you could see that the higher dose of 0.25 started to have an impact, and you can see a decline in body weight as well as a decline in hyperphagia. So that allowed us to as well go to the FDA and have discussions with the FDA on the path forward. With Tesomet, we proposed a phase 2b trial, which is the one that you see here. We did ask the FDA if they would be willing to consider this trial as a pivotal trial. They did ask us as a result, they were willing to consider it, and they asked for the study protocol. They reviewed it, and ultimately they came back and suggested that we do a phase 2b followed by a phase 3, primarily because they also want us to look separately at pediatric patients. And therefore, they did want to explore a variety of different doses, all the way down to 0.125, with the potential that, for a separate pediatric patients, we may need to go to other doses. So they really wanted to explore all these doses. We will have 3 different doses of 0.125, 0.25, and 0.375 versus placebo for a 4-month double-blind study, followed by a 9-month open label extension. And as I said, this study will also be initiated in the first half of next year. So in summary, we are preparing to initiate 2 phase 2b trials in the first half of next year in both hypothalamic obesity and Prader-Willi. We have a robust drug discovery platform that will fuel our future portfolio, starting with SAN711, which will move into phase 1 clinical development in the first half of next year, followed by SAN903, which will move into phase 1 clinical development in the first half of 2022. With the proceeds from the recent raise, we are building our team, a very experienced team of clinical development, regulatory, basically all the functions that are needed in a biotech company to be able to do all the things that we are doing. And the vast majority of that team will be based here in the Boston area. And last but not least, we are well financed to advance on our programs, as I mentioned earlier, both with Tesomet to the next stage, as well as the preclinical moving into the clinical, as well as building the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a good presentation. I will ask some questions, and if we have any questions from the audience out there, we will also ask them. Okay, I can start with the last thing you mentioned. You say you're well financed, and you have also raised some money. I think you said $65 million in a directed emission. For how long, approximately, do you think this money will? How long will this money take you?
Yeah, so this money will be definitely sufficient to conduct both phase 2b trials, as well as both phase 1 trials, as well as building the team, and it will take us into 2022. Okay,
thank you. And Tesomet, the product, how will you describe the competition in this area? What can you see out there from competitors?
Yeah, so I mean, the good thing, definitely from a patient perspective,
Okay,
is
it's different. You can use it for different disorders, but if you describe the competition in general.
yeah. So in hypothalamic obesity, there is no competition, at least no competition in advanced stages as we are. So there's some earlier research, just completed phase 1. So, we are definitely by far the most advanced company in clinical development for hypothalamic obesity. When it comes to Prader-Willi syndrome, it is quite a busy market. There are two, which is great for patients. Patients currently have no alternatives, have no options. There are two companies that are developing products in Prader-Willi syndrome. Both are slightly more advanced than we are, but they have a different mechanism of action, and there's room for all drugs on the market. Not every mechanism of action will necessarily work for every patient. And therefore, having options on the market is always important. Some of the other companies are in or completed a phase 3 and are in discussions with the FDA. But again, different mechanism of action to Tesomet.
Okay, thank you. The market potential, maybe you mentioned it, but in money, if we are talking future revenues, what is the market potential for the different for your products?
Yeah, well, we're a publicly traded company. I'm not going to give guidance on what we believe, that would look like. Definitely not on this call. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question. If and when we can answer, it will be in a broader setting where we share all the information with everyone. But I can't, unfortunately, give a prediction. Yeah.
If you're successful in this phase 2, for an example, how long will it take when you're through the next phase 3, if you are successful?
Yeah, so I mean, a phase 3 will probably be a slightly smaller study design than the phase 2b, simply because we will move forward into a phase 3 with most likely 1 or 2 max doses. So it will be a slightly smaller, probably less arms. Which will mean a faster recruitment period, most likely. But at a high level, I would say, phase 3 with recruitment, et cetera, would probably take, give or take, a year and a half.
Okay, thank you. And one of my last questions, you are more and more a US-based company, but you have your foundation from Scandinavia, Copenhagen, and you're listed at Stockholm Stock Exchange. How do you see on your road forward? Are you going to be? You are more and more a U.S. company. How is the road forward?
Yeah, so I mean, as I think as I stated in the past, this is meaning the U.S. is the largest rare disease market in the world.
Of course.
This is where the largest investors in capital market is. This is where all our clinical trials will take place moving forward, and therefore it is imperative that we have a substantial presence here, which was not the case up until January when I joined the company. We are now, building our foundation here with the intent to be strongly present here in the U.S. to be able to do everything that I mentioned. Right? We We definitely are planning our clinical trials in the US and elsewhere, but primarily in the US. We want to make sure that we're close to the key opinion leaders who are, many of them are based here. So, this doesn't take away from our heritage and our history, and we are a Swedish company, publicly traded in Sweden, and our origins are from Denmark. It's not to take away any of that, but if we want to build and grow the company, we have to have a presence here in the US.
Okay, thank you very much. That will be the last word for today, and we will wish you all our best. Good luck.
Thank you so much.